Part 1. The Pride of Empires, A Giant Awakens. On a hazy April morning in 1912, the Southampton docks witnessed the zenith of an era. The Titanic was not merely a mass of steel and rivets. It was the ultimate symbol of British industrial might at the twilight of the Victorian Age, a testament to humanity's desire to conquer nature and master the laws of physics. The world was intoxicated by the limitless optimism of the Industrial Revolution, so much so that engineers and the press of the time didn't hesitate to use reckless phrases like even God himself could not sink this ship. For the thousands gathered at the docks, this massive hull was not just a means of transport. It was proof that their civilization was untouchable and their technological triumphs eternal. Yet deep within that magnificent hull, it never crossed anyone's mind how vulnerable those few millimeters of steel plating and the overly optimistic, watertight compartment systems truly were against the immense cold of the ocean. Humanity, asleep in the cradle of the giant it had built, remained blissfully unaware that its future was about to be shattered at the ocean's deepest point. They were living the sweetest dream of arrogance, never suspecting that the monument to their pride would soon become a grave. Part 2. The Wreck of the Titan, a chilling fate written on paper. Let us turn the pages of history back to 1898, years before the Titanic's keel was even planned in the shipyards. An author named Morgan Robertson penned a novella titled Futility. However, after the Great Catastrophe of 1912, copies of this book were republished under a much more striking and bone-chilling title, The Wreck of the Titan. The protagonist of the story was the Titan, the most luxurious and massive ship of its time, claimed to be unsinkable. The haunting reality is that both ships sank in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic in April after hitting an iceberg. Neither had enough lifeboats. Both carried approximately 800 passengers and suffered a similar tragic fate. These coincidences, from the names to the dimensions, force us to push aside rational thought and enter a realm of deep questioning. Do some disasters hang in the air long before they strike? Or did humanity somehow sense the outcome of its own hubris and encode it into the pages of literature as a warning? This is far beyond mere coincidence. It is a cold prophecy whispered by fate into the flow of history. Part 3. Invisible Negligence and Aesthetic Arrogance. Explaining the sinking of the Titanic through simple variables like speed or iceberg is a gross oversimplification. Behind the inability to spot the iceberg that dark night lay a tragedy of a key. In those moments when the lookouts were blindly watching for the berg, the binoculars they needed were locked in a cabinet. And the key to that cabinet was in the pocket of a crew member who had been transferred off the ship at the very last minute. A massive giant was blinded by a $2 metal key in what of the famous fourth smokestack. It was a project of aesthetic vanity. It emitted no smoke. It was merely a decorative shell added to make the ship look majestic, full, and powerful. They sacrificed safety for visual impact, adding technical flaws to impress passengers. In the engineering mindset of that era, how a ship looked was prioritized over how safe it was. Right here, where image suffocated reality, disaster became an inevitability, because the Titanic was, in essence, the sacrifice of its own design, flaws to its own arrogance. Part 4. The 37-second oversight. Why didn't they just brake? We all know the story of the collision, but the real scandal isn't the moment of impact. It's hidden in the 37 seconds of indecision that preceded it. Modern simulations reveal that Officer William Murdoch's attempt to put the ship full astern the moment he saw the iceberg actually accelerated the disaster. As those massive propellers began to spin in reverse, the ship's ability to maneuver vanished instantly. The giant was undone by its own momentum. If the ship had continued to turn at full speed, it might well have grazed past that fatal iceberg. Why did Murdoch give the order to stop? Because he believed that in the middle of the ocean, the safest way to handle a massive metal object was to halt it. That design, a slave to hubris, sacrificed the ship's steering power to the power of its engines. Part 5: The media's big lie. Did the Titanic actually sink? Now I invite you to a highly controversial, perhaps to some insane conspiracy theory, perhaps the greatest cover-up in history. What if the ship that sank that night wasn't actually the Titanic? The Titanic's near twin, the Olympic, had suffered a major collision shortly before the sinking, and the insurance company had flatly refused to cover the costs of the heavy damage. According to the striking theory that emerged, the company secretly swapped the badly damaged Olympic with the newly built, unsinkable Titanic. In other words, what went down into the ocean that night wasn't the Titanic, but a repainted, renamed, and already crippled wreck. Claims that some parts found in the wreckage carry the production numbers of the Olympic remain shrouded in mystery to this day. We commemorate the Titanic as a massive tragedy, but what if this tragedy was actually a planned financial liquidation operation? Who wrote history, and what are we really believing? Perhaps the legend that was said to be unsinkable was merely the victim of a high-stakes insurance game played on paper. Final, the icebergs of the modern age. When the Titanic sank, the world was in shock. Because of this catastrophe, maritime laws, lifeboat requirements, and radio systems were overhauled. Every great disaster is, in fact, a heavy price paid for a safer future. But what about today? We think we've solved everything with AI. We're making space travel routine. And we are building massive, flawless systems. We are once again building ships we call unsinkable. Is our overconfidence in our technology driving us toward another iceberg? The wreckage of the Titanic is not just an accident from 1912. It is a cycle that repeats at every stage of technological advancement. In a way, the Titanic is us. We are those who live as if tomorrow will never come. We are those who, comfortable in the systems we call unsinkable, fail to hear the rising water in the lower decks. Everything we build with our own arrogance is destined to face either time itself or an unforeseen iceberg. Perhaps the true story of the Titanic wasn't just the iron and steel, but the brief, defiant love of Jack and Rose, two souls trying to be real amidst a cold, class-ridden system. Their story was the greatest blow to the ship's false claim of being unsinkable. Because while a ship may sink and a system may collapse, a few hours of freedom shared in the middle of the ocean is more durable than any steel. So tell me, is technology a savior for you, or is it the modern arrogance that defies limits? What will be the next Titanic, and will we have the binoculars in our hands to see that iceberg coming? If you want to dive into these cold waters with me, uncover the dark pages of history, and question the icebergs of the modern world together, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support is the fuel that brings these forgotten stories to light. I read every single one of your comments, so share your thoughts below. See you in the next deep dive, at the edge of a new mystery. For now, goodbye.